So
Hello, how is everyone out there doing today? I am super, super excited to be here with the Radical Independent. And for those of you who are not aware, Two Evils is part of the brand new Kicking It Off in 5 Days in the Two-Party System Network. And what we are going to be talking about on these broadcasts is going to be Two Evils. A division of the Republic into two great parties was defined by John Adams as what would probably be the ultimate demise of the Republic. We've just seen it over and over, and I'm here with the Radical Independent to talk about what that looks like, how the Radical Independent came about. And so, Chris, I'm just going to turn over to you to just kind of talk about what the Radical Independent is and what you've done in your group in standing this up.
sure. So thanks for having me, Amy. So I've always been pretty interested in well, first of all, I've been very independent minded, right? So the radical independent. But always interested in the social sciences, stuff like that. It's my background. I'm a teacher. I've done some other things as well. But so this has been kind of a lifelong thing. I'm not an expert per se, but I'm more of an observer. But I think just looking at things and how they've been going the past, I don't know, a couple decades really, but especially more recently. A lot of concern, obviously, a lot of things. So yeah, about 4.5 years ago, it was the summertime, and I was not doing a whole lot. I was in front of the computer a lot, so I decided, well, let's give it a go. Start up a page. I'm not an activist really or anything like that. I'm not like, I gotta go march. I gotta do this. I gotta get on social media and it just kind of happened because it was more of a hobby, kind of an intellectual outlet for me to just mess around a little bit. Because when I started off, I didn't have a lot of, I didn't know where I was going with it really. So the development within that first month or so, really, it just sort of formed and morphed into this kind of anti-duopoly, anti-two-party system type of setup, more independent thinking, critical independent thinking, but also politically independent. Kind of fighting against the emotional tribalism, the polarization, the division, a lot of the, so it just kind of turned into basically what it is today, and rather quickly and kind of naturally and organically, which was kind of nice. There wasn't a lot of planning involved. I just sort of fell into it that way.
I love that you're sharing that, and I just think such an important point about over 40% of people now have identified as being independents rather than affiliated with either party. So if you look at a 3-party split, I mean, really, the independents are now the majority of the system, and giving a place where people can have a voice and where it's not automatically assumed that if you're for one thing, you're against another. So let's talk a little bit. You sent me the goals of the organization. Let's talk a little bit about your goals on making sure that there are independent voices in the political community.
Right. So, just kind of stepping back for a second, you're totally right in the growth of the independent movement, independent voters now outnumbering Republicans or Democrats. It's a huge thing. But also, how many independent candidates are there? How many independent representatives are there? So obviously, there's a huge disconnect. You got this the largest block of voters, basically, and virtually no representation, right? So we're kind of channeled, we're forced into this two-party paradigm. And so it's a broken system. It's not the consent of the governed. It's not, there's huge issues here. So my goals, because I'm it, right? I'm the page. I have no staff. I have nothing. Right? So it's just me doing this kind of on the side. But the goals, pretty much what I have listed on the page, have to do with election reform. Okay, that's the big thing. It's kind of like dual. Okay, you have your systemic structural issues, and that's your election reform. That's your I support fixing ballot access so independents and third parties get have a fair shot to make the ballot. In a lot of states, it's completely unfair. It's really distorted. Ranked choice voting or other types of proportional voting, maybe. I'm a big fan of independent primaries, and no one knows what that is or talks about that. Open primaries kind of has the the momentum. Basically, they've been around a while, and they're pretty well known. open primaries are okay, but really I'm a big fan of independent primaries, and that's kind of a separate thing. But a lot of these structural issues, maybe even term limits, maybe even campaign finance, ending gerrymandering, all these little structural tweaks that we can do, because a bad system will beat a good person every time. And that's what we basically have now. So it doesn't matter how great your candidate is. You know what? At the end of the day, they're going to get chewed up and spit out. You know what I mean? The system is full of perverse incentives, major issues all over the place. It's just kind of unfixable unless you go into structurally and implement some of these election campaign reforms, electoral reforms. But then you also have the social cultural component, and that's a big issue for me as well. And so I talk about, critical independent thinking and civil discourse and union and coming together and stuff like that. Really, everything not, it goes against everything that's happening today with the toxic dysfunction and polarization and demonization. All that stuff, it's getting us nowhere. The dead end road. This is, it's killing this country. And so you got also, I feel like you need both. You need that systemic election reform type stuff, but you also kind of need to change hearts and minds to a certain degree. We got to sort of rethink how we look at politics, how we do politics in this country. We've jumped the rails. You know what I mean? And so getting back to a true representative republic, and rational self-government.
No, I love this. I always talk about the fact that if you only have two options, like is that really two? Like, when you go to a restaurant with only two options, like two things on the menu, like you go into an ice cream parlor, there's 31 flavors. You're not going to go into an ice cream parlor and go, oh, there's two flavors. And then if you want, if there are two flavors, you can even do the twist cone or something, right? You can at least mush them together. But like, you go into politics and it's like, oh, you're either one or the other. 40% of the people are clearly not represented at all.
Right.
One of the things I want to talk about is how can you get involved locally, and what can people do as individuals that you've seen?
That's a great point. I use that analogy all the time because when it comes to the market, it's really good at producing lots of stuff, and there's a lot of competition there. And you go down a cereal aisle, and there's 95 different types of cereal. It's almost ridiculous, right? But like you said, politics, two options. We've dumbed down the complexity of the universe into two pathetic, simplistic binary options. It's just completely ridiculous. So what can individual people do? First of all, the Radical Independent is kind of a media news page. When you start a Facebook page, you kind of identify what kind of business it is. And so that's what I chose. So I'm a mouthpiece. I'm about getting the information out, right? I'm about spreading the word, spreading the message, trying to get people on board to a certain extent, educate, inform, stuff like that. So I'm not really boots on the ground, forming groups and doing the real work, really, of going out there, getting signatures, knocking on doors, stuff like that. But I do suggest several things, just individually, and it's really the basic stuff that kind of goes back in almost any situation, probably. But it's I tell people you should make election reform a top priority, not maybe the top priority. I'm not you. I don't know what you love. I don't know your goals, whatever, right? But generally speaking, make it a top priority and kind of vote based on that. We have to put that in the forefront, because if we're going to just be sort of spinning our wheels in these partisan wedge issues that kind of get us nowhere, it's ridiculous. It's all diversion, right? So we got to really focus on the election reform, put that front and center, support candidates, make the calls, support the groups, donating time, donating money, spreading the word, trying to just inform and educate people, stuff like that. It's just the basic political stuff, grassroots type thing that's got to happen, because I think it needs to be state by state. It needs to be kind of at that state and local level. That's where most of the election law is. And that's where we have the best chance to make sort of the biggest gains. Because if you start at the top down national level, I just don't know if you can get a lot of traction there. But there's a ton of groups out there doing the real work, and I support them. I mentioned them, and the two-party system. We talked a little earlier about that, and they've been around, and they're launching a bunch of new stuff in a few days, I guess. And
this podcast is going to be one of them. So
right, and so but I mentioned a lot of different groups where people can get involved and stuff like that. But that's really what it's about. You got to make it a priority and kind of don't succumb to the manipulation, to the partisan nonsense, right? It's pitting people against each other for them to stay in power and maintain control. It's we got to get past that. We got, that's part of the social cultural aspect of it. But changing our mindset, um, and just trying to get involved with those structural, election reform type movements, groups. There's a ton of great organizations out there doing great things to try to move us in that direction. So, yeah, I mean, it's just getting involved. The problem is you have like a lot of people on the left and the right, and they're very, they're very intense and passionate, and they're very partisan. But it's trying to get the people kind of in the middle, where they know something's wrong, they feel it, they sense it, they can see it. It's like things aren't right. We're we're on a bad road. It's trying to get those people really on board, and they tend to be more moderate, and they're not. So you have to kind of bring them in. You gotta, and that's kind of where I see myself trying to appeal to those types of people, mainly because there's a huge number of people out there that are just checked out. It's like they don't see a way forward. Well, we got to let them know, no, these are the issues, and this is what we can do about it. There are solutions. A lot of people are ready to give up.
And Chris, there's a lot of reasons too. I was talking to someone, and I want to say it was in Nevada, and they were trying to get a third party onto the platforms and everything. And the barrier to get new parties and an independent parties is incredibly, incredibly hard. And if you actually go into some of the legislation right now, I think it was the Make Elections Great Again Act. If you look at the fine print, it really goes against any funding that goes to independent and third parties, and really strengthens the duopoly. And people have to be aware of the stuff that's buried in those bills like that.
It's terrible. It basically bans ranked choice voting in not so many words. You know what I mean? It's terrible. They will always do, either party basically will always try to protect their power. I mean, of course, why wouldn't they, right? But so they're going to be against a lot of these things. It's understandable, but it's unfortunate. A lot of people, election reform is kind of turning into a partisan issue, because a lot of times now the Republicans are kind of against some of these election reforms. And I feel like this is something that anybody should be able to support, right? Well, unless you're a hardcore partisan, maybe not. Unless you're really knee deep in the duopoly, maybe not. But libertarians, Greens, all kinds of third parties, all kinds of independents and moderates, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, right? We know, we're trapped. We're trapped in a broken system. They control elections and government. And I feel like we can get a broad coalition. We may not agree on policy, on everything. That's okay. But on this issue, we know it's broken and it's not working for us. And we need to kind of work together in that way, broad coalition to kind of push for those changes. Because that's what it's going to take, right? We got to come together in this area.
And Chris, I want to highlight what you said, the work that you do at the Radical Independent. For those out there listening now or listening in the future, is it's about getting a coalition of people together to talk. So often when you're an independent and you talk to somebody who's partisan, they try to make you feel you don't have an option, like your vote is a waste, that either you vote for the two big parties or your vote doesn't count. And there are so many independents out there, more independents than everyone else. I want to just continue to beat that drum, and what you do on your platform to try to make sure that people know, like, they're not alone.
Right. And we get that a lot, right? Because I'm a nonpartisan page. So I'm an independent nonpartisan page. And, so people, it confuses people. They don't understand it. They don't believe it. They think I'm a fraud, or they think I'm a closet Republican or a closet Democrat or whatever, or I'm a Russian, right? There's just so much, like, the stories and conspiracies and weird comments that I've had to delete has just been ridiculous. But to make a long story short, it confuses people. I think once they start understanding that, wow, there's a lot of people. A lot of independents vote Republican and Democrat. I get it. What other choice you got, really? Not much, right? but at the end of the day, I think there'll be an inflection point. You know, we've got the numbers. We got to kind of coalesce. We got to kind of, and at some point, pushing the message, spreading the word, and some of these other groups and movements out there doing the, like, pushing for ranked choice voting, stuff like that. Um, there's a lot of different groups. I think there'll be an inflection point. I think there will reach a tipping point where basically, it seems insurmountable right now, and it's a struggle, and we're pushing and we're pushing and we're trying to grow this thing, and it is growing. But we'll reach a point where we'll see a sudden shift where it'll start growing exponentially, where it will become really um, a major thing in the political um, landscape, really, right? Because it is kind of unknown to a certain extent. We have the numbers. It's like fertile ground, but we haven't sprouted yet. You know what I mean?
No, and Chris, I think that you just bring up such a great point, and we've just got to get the word out, let people know, like, you're not alone. There are options. We could go through this with you. I promote Green Party, Libertarian Party, Forward Party. There are so many different parties out there that, they need more traction. We need more options.
Right. We need
But
the
going
political
with two
competition.
evils is still evil.
Yeah, you're right. And it's kind of going back to what we were saying about the ice cream and the cereal or whatever. We need the political competition. It's healthy. It's going to make everything, the system better. A free marketplace of ideas, right? All these fundamental aspects, principles, our constitutional, our founding values. You know, none of that really is working anymore because the system's been so warped by corrupt rigged duopoly, right? So we need to
Right.
get back to that and adding political competition. And of course, I'm a big fan of third parties. I'm like the more the merrier. But at the end of the day, my heart is with the independents, right? And so, independents being able to go out and compete. And that's kind of where independent primaries can kind of come into play a little bit too. But yeah, who's been making election laws for the past 150 years? R's and D's. Well, who's made it practically impossible for third parties and independents to gain any sort of traction? Well, what do you expect, right?
Yeah,
Why,
and
why,
I
why worry
really
about competition when you get to make the rules, right?
Yeah, and I really want to highlight something really important there is third party independent candidates have been doing very, very well at local and even some state level elections. And so people need to see it normalized. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you're never going to have an independent president. Well, first of all, don't say never. But for those out there who are only worried about the presidential elections, I mean,
Yeah.
if you look at it, more and more school boards, county sheriff, mayor's offices, they're all moving more and more where you're getting different options where people are trying to move away. We're fighting big money in this. We're fighting everything else. You've mentioned before, you are an army of one. You are literally just out there, the only person running your page. I want to thank you for that. And with that, any last statements, remarks before we wrap it up for the day?
Well, not particularly. I think we covered a good amount of ground. Yeah, I think getting the word out and maybe by a lot of the groups working together, kind of like having talks with each other, like we're doing now, stuff like that, kind of building that infrastructure. You know what I mean? I think we'll hit that inflection point at some times.
Gosh, Chris, I really appreciate your time. For those of you out there, please like, please subscribe. Please pay attention to both the radical independent, and the two-party system. And here, if you want to follow my content, we cover current events and cocktails, which is, current events are more fun if you're drinking, as well as we're starting the two evils here. So please continue to join us, and we'll be putting out what is going on in our current events. Thanks a lot. Please like, please subscribe.
Thank you.